here to help you with that. And if you like that, or that resonates with you, like and subscribe to this channel, because that's what we're all about.
Hey guys, Jared the HOA Crusader here, and today we're going to be discussing a fun topic because, you know, anarchy, and anarchy's fun, right? So today I'm going to teach you how to hostily take over your HOA. Now, a lot of people don't realize that this is pretty easy to do. HOAs are corporations, they're also democratic organizations. So if enough people are mad, you can essentially take over control at any given point in time. So, fun topic of the day is hostile takeovers of your HOA. Okay, now why am I teaching you this? Well, in the comment section, I keep getting a bunch of people saying, HOAs are evil and corrupt people, and they are money hungry and greedy and all this other stuff about how HOAs are terrible. Now, I always advise people to try to understand the other side before just passing judgment on them, but there are in fact times where the HOA is being mismanaged, either by a bad property manager or management company, or by a bad board. Now, if it's a bad property management company, you can probably work with the board to get the management company out. However, a lot of times, a bad management company that gets retained, the issue is that the board is also not great. So there are times where you need to take over for the HOA. A lot of times it's been the same board for years or decades, and they have their way of doing things, and they're not really inclusive, and they're not being transparent about how money is being spent. They're not allowing other people to participate. They're not letting you know when the board meetings are. And there can be a lot of issues around that stuff. So, fortunately with HOAs, you are a shareholder with a controlling stake, so are all your neighbors. And if enough of you are upset, you can take over your HOA, get the entire board voted out, and fire your management company and start fresh. And sometimes that's what needs to happen. So, to initiate this process, I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide of how to go about hostily taking over your HOA. Again, this is kind of last resort stuff, so you don't want to just run around doing this, but hey, have at it, have fun. 1, you need to talk to your neighbors. So, you're mad at your HOA, but you don't know if your neighbors are. You want to talk to other people in the community and find out if anybody else feels like you, okay? If there's a lot of people that feel like you, then you've got a pretty good shot at doing this. If you're the only one who feels the way you do, then you probably can't hostily take over your HOA. But assuming that your neighbors also believe the board is bad and they also don't like whatever's going on, it is a democratic process. So it all boils down to votes, i.e. popularity. So you and your neighbors need to discuss who are the people that are the problem and who are the people that are going to replace them. Because it does you no good if you vote a bunch of people out and you don't replace them with people who are better. So assuming that this is your little pet project, you're gonna be a new board member and you're gonna need to pick a couple more people depending on how large the size of the board is. So boards are usually 3, 5, or 7 members. They're always odd numbers. The reason being you never want to have a stalemate in voting. So usually the way the boards are set up are an odd number, 3, 5, or 7 is the most common. And those are how many spots you need to fill. The issue is that if you have any vacancies remaining when you're done, basically anybody can make an argument to fill that vacancy and serve in that role. So you could potentially vote someone out, and if you don't fill the spot with someone new and someone better, then one of these old people can potentially jump back on. So the next step, you've talked to your neighbors, you've established a plan, you're probably going about it relatively quietly, and you're gonna know who your audience is. Maybe put some feelers out, maybe don't go full blast right away, but try to find out if other people are feeling the same way. You find out that yes, there's a lot of people feeling the same way. You've found your potential replacements for board members once you guys get this done, and you're like, okay, now it's time to take some action. How do we go about actually getting them out legally? Well, to find out how many board members there are, you're gonna go to your bylaws, okay? Now, there are 3 different types of documents that govern your HOA. You've got your declaration, and then your bylaws, and then your rules and regulations. Your declaration has more to do with the actual structure and the layout and what belongs to who. That's not relevant really for this. You've got your bylaws, which are relevant for this. The bylaws say how the organization is run, who's in charge, what are the positions, how many directors are on the board. It's a board of directors, though. Officers get selected by the board once they're in their position. We'll get to that. So you have to go to your bylaws anyways to find out how many board vacancies there are, or how many board of directors positions there are. Once you find out, you're also going to want to find what are the provisions for removing a board member. A board member. Okay. It's going to give you, in that section of the bylaws, step-by-step instructions as to how you go about removing a board member. Usually it's one of 2 ways. A special meeting has to be called. A special unit owners meeting. Unit owners. All right. So a special meeting has to be called for this function. There's 2 individuals, or maybe 2 individuals or a process that can require this meeting to be called. Either, and it depends on your bylaws, so check your bylaws, it'll give you specific instructions. It's either by the president can call this meeting, 2/3 of the board can call the meeting, or 20% of ownership can call the meeting. All right, so this brings you back to, you've talked to your neighbors. How many neighbors do you have that are on your side? If there's 20% of the total association that feels the same way you do, you just sign a petition or write a letter and have all of you sign it. Make sure your unit numbers are on there. Only 1 vote per unit, okay? So just a husband and wife or 2 people living in the same unit, it doesn't count as 2 votes. It's 20% of the units. So if your association is 100 members, you gotta get 20 people to sign off on this. If your association is 30, you only need 6 people to sign off on this, right? So you're gonna get 20% of ownership to say, hey, we want to hold a special unit owners meeting for the purpose of removing XYZ board members. I mean, it can be the whole board, but it has to be on the agenda, okay? Must be on the agenda. So if it's a special unit owners meeting held for this specific purpose, there's going to be an agenda, and the agenda item is going to be removal of, Sally, Nancy, and Joe, let's say. Now, third very critical component, proper notice. Okay, so for it to all be legal, the bylaws are also going to talk about what is proper notice, okay? Proper notice means that the community has to be notified in an appropriate way that this is going on. Usually in this type of situation, it's going to be hand-delivered letters. And usually it has to be like somewhere between 10 and 14 days sometimes 21 days ahead of time, that notice has to be given to all of ownership of the date and time of the meeting, okay? So it needs to have A, date, B, of meeting, time of meeting, C, purpose or agenda, okay? So date of meeting, time of meeting, and purpose. And it has to be delivered properly. Proper delivery. So, depending on what the bylaws say, it can be mailed, certified, or hand delivered. If they allow an electronic form of delivery, that's great too. But usually for this type of thing, you want to make sure that it's hand delivered or certified. And this has to go to the entire community. You cannot exclude giving proper notice to specific people because you think they're not going to vote your way. Everybody has to get notice. All right, so you've set the date. It's more than 14 days away. And I think it can be no greater than 60 days, right? But it's going to take a few weeks to happen. You can't set a meeting date more than 2 months in advance. I think usually it can't be more than 60 days. So at this meeting, you've given proper notice. You've got 20% of ownership calling for this meeting as required by the documents or whatever the percentage is according to the bylaws. And you have on the agenda that your purpose is to remove bad board members. Okay, I think we said Nancy, Sally, and Joe. So you get to the meeting and you have a vote. And well, before you have a vote, the issue is discussed. So, okay, I'm gonna switch markers. Okay, so at the meeting, most of your work is done, okay? This is most of the technical work needed to achieve this end. At the meeting, there's a few things that are required. One is a quorum. You need enough people to show up. At a special unit owners meeting, your bylaws are going to dictate what defines a quorum. Many times it's just whoever shows up, right? If it requires a certain minimum number of people to show up for a vote to be valid, you need to reach that minimum number or minimum percentage. Sometimes they'll say at least 1/3 of the community needs to be there, or half of the community needs to be there. Or sometimes it just says, you know, if proper notice is given, whoever shows up to the meeting constitutes a quorum. So your bylaws are going to dictate that. So you need to establish quorum, that enough people are there. You're going to hope that you have enough votes, okay? Because Sally, what does it say? Nancy, Sally, and Joe, they have friends. And their friends are there too, and their friends voted them in, presumably. So you need to have more friends than them, okay? And it's going to be a simple majority vote. Usually there's not a supermajority required for this process. It's just a simple majority, so you need to bring more votes than they have for any of these specific things. So you need to establish a quorum. You hope you have enough votes. You need to outline verbally your issues, your complaints, let's say. Be like, Nancy, Sally, and Joe, we don't think you're doing a great job because of XYZ. There's been a lack of transparency. You haven't been holding publicly accessible board meetings for some time. We're not privy to the minutes. And there's other bylaw or declaration violations of the community that you are imposing. That's the easiest way, is just say they're not doing things administratively correctly. Or you can say something as simple as, we don't feel like you have the best interest of the community at heart. We feel that the financial choices you are making are not in the best interest of those living at this association. So you're going to outline your complaints publicly to these people. They are going to have a chance to defend themselves. They can argue back. You don't have to engage tick for tack. I say this, you say that. All you have to do is outline your complaints and give them a chance to defend themselves. That's it. Once they defend themselves, you don't have to go back and forth arguing with them. It's just, okay, this is our issue. They say, this is our defense. And then you put it to a vote. So Also refresh yourself on Robert's Rule of Law, as that needs to kind of generally be followed for these things to be valid. But it's just a procedural overview of how these types of meetings are to be conducted, motions, approvals, votes for, votes against, abstentions, all that good stuff. Okay, so you've given them a chance to defend themselves, and now one person has to make a motion to call for a vote. Someone else has to second that motion. The room votes on whether they're ready to vote. And if they vote affirmatively, it's like, okay, we're gonna put it to a vote. If there's not a majority vote to say, hey, let's put it to a vote, then it goes back to discussion. But if someone makes a motion to call for a vote, it's seconded, the room votes, everybody says, yes, we're ready to vote. You call for a vote, and you have to remove each of them individually. So, next I make a motion to remove Sally. We'll start with Sally as a director from the board of directors. Everybody votes on it. If you have more votes than her and her friends, she's out, and it creates a vacancy. And then you follow the process, A, B, and C. Same thing you don't have to go back to the top. You remove Sally, Nancy, and Joe. And sorry to people named Sally, Nancy, and Joe. You're probably great people. This isn't about that. So Sally, Nancy, and Joe are now removed. Let's say it's a 3-member board. But if it's more than that, you got to remove everybody. Or as many of the people are bad. You might have a friend on the board. You might have 1 or 2 people that are here like saying, hey, we're trying to do X, Y, Z for the community. And you might even have someone on the board who's a minority kind of position on the board saying, hey, I will help you guys do this because what these other people are doing are not correct. So it doesn't mean you have to vote everybody out. If there's people who do represent your interests well, you can leave them in. It's just whoever the problems are, or whoever you feel the problem is, you vote them out. So when you vote out Sally, Nancy, and Joe, it leaves 3 vacancies, okay? So you've got vacancies to fill. Okay, you've got 3 vacancies. Have to fill those vacancies, because if not, they can just volunteer and go back into power. So now, nominations are held. Anyone who wants to stand for the vacancies can stand for the vacancies and briefly describe. It's called a qualification. We say, why are you qualified for this position? And they say, hi, my name's Alex. I've been in this community, 8 years, and I'm an accountant by trade, and I just really want to help the community out. I don't like what's been done in the past. I think we can fix X, Y, Z if we do things the right way. And then, whoever else wants to stand for the nomination does the same thing. And so you have your nominees. People can nominate themselves. People can nominate other people. I can say, hey, AJ, I nominate you for the board because you're smart and you know the community better than anybody and you've been here the longest, or whatever the case is. Whatever my reasons are, I can nominate them. That person then has to accept the nomination and qualify still, right? But great. Remember, you cannot nominate people who are not on the property deed to their unit, to their piece of property. So it can't be a tenant, it can't be a spouse who's not on the deed, can't be a son or any other representative. It has to be someone who owns the property, right? They have to be on the title and deed. Okay, next. 9. So then votes are taken, say, okay, for this vacancy, and you have to vote each vacancy in, so you've got 1 vacancy, 2 vacancies, 3 vacancies, and you say, all those in favor of putting voting Alex into this first vacancy, say aye. All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions, right? And as long as there's a majority of say yes, Alex is now the new board member in that vacancy. You repeat the process for vacancies 2 and 3, and it's, Alex, Alice, and AJ, we'll say. So now you have 3 new board members. who's president, who's secretary, who's treasurer. It doesn't matter, that's not your business. That is now their business, okay? They are going to meet after the meeting, hold an executive session or a, it's actually not an executive session. They're probably gonna have a meeting right after this is done, and then they're gonna select between them who wants to be president, who wants to be vice president, who wants to be treasurer, or whatever the case is. Those are called the officers. So president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, all those are officers, not directors. The community does not get to vote who is an officer. They just get to vote who's on the board. They fill the vacancies on the board. The board decides who the officers are, okay? So once they've been voted into power, then we get a motion to close the meeting. Close, seconded, all in favor, all against. The meeting's now closed. Hopefully during all this time, someone was recording minutes. Very important. Record minutes. Okay? Sorry, that's sideways, but record minutes. Very, very important that you do that. You can either record the meeting, I do that a lot of times, but the minutes have to include who was present, their names and unit numbers, how many people, and the tally of votes at each of these voting junctures. It doesn't have to say who voted which way. As a matter of fact, there are restrictions, legal restrictions against including that information in the minutes. But it does have to tally, say, hey, there was 17 votes for, 12 votes against, and 2 abstentions. That has to be recorded. And what the vote was for, right? So, vote to remove Sally, 17 said yes, remove her, 12 said no, and 2 abstained. Great. So you have 17, 12, 2. Okay? And then you say it passes. So someone's recording that. That gets cleaned up after the fact, and that is part of the public record of the association. So that gets stored with the rest of the documents. Legally, these people are now in charge, and your board of directors is not infallible. They're no different than any other unit owner in the association. So all that is required for you to be on the board of directors is for your name to be on the title or deed to the property. Or, let's say you own it in an LLC, that, your LLC owns it and you're the owner of the LLC, something along those lines. That's all that's required. Everybody thinks that the board is, they're who they are. You can't change that. That's not true. If enough of you and your neighbors are upset about what they're doing, you don't think they're doing a good job, it's quite easy. I know it seems complicated, but it's quite linear to find a few other neighbors who feel the same way, as long as there's enough of them and more of them than there are of people who really are passionate that this board's doing a great job, then you can make this happen. It's not a hard process. People just need to feel strongly about it and show up. That said, if you don't have the numbers to make this happen, unfortunately, it is a democratic process. So if Sally, Nancy, and Joe are more popular and more people in the community feel like they're doing a good job than people that don't, this process is not going to work. Okay? So, and if that's the case, and unfortunately, sometimes that is the case. I've seen it where board members are making the wrong decision, but they're well loved by the community. And so the community follows them into a wrong or inadvisable course of action. And there's not much you can do about that. But it's worth a try. If you're talking to your neighbors and there's a lot of you who are upset that whatever the case is, dues have gone up, that everybody's getting fined for having Christmas lights up, whatever the case is, if it's something where all the neighbors are on the same page regarding that thing or regarding the current board's fitness to serve and represent the community well, then there's this procedure or process that's outlined in the bylaws. Remember, what you're looking for is the section about removing a board member or voting in and removing board members. Also, what's going to be relevant is special unit owners meetings. Make sure you look up that section. Proper notice. There's a section on format of the meeting or how a meeting is supposed to be held. That's good to reference as well. But your bylaws are going to have the keys to the kingdom as far as this procedure. So as long as you do those things and call the meeting properly and you have enough votes at that meeting to get what you're trying to get done, then your HOA can be a whole new world and a whole new government and a whole new regime. And I know that triggers a lot of people on social media. They hate when I use that term, but it is what it is. It is a regime, and that's how easy it is to change. So I hope you got some value out of this. As always, I'm sure there's a number of people that I've upset. And just remember, this can be a weapon and a tool. All right, it's however you use it wisely. It's a powerful form of recourse that you have so that you don't lose your investment if that's what you're worried about, or that your community isn't unbearable and unlivable. But, it doesn't mean that we should just go around, executing this procedure willy-nilly. Try to understand, try to find lesser means of recourse, before going full send on this, because it's a lot of work and it's emotional and it's going to hurt feelings and neighbors are going to be mad at each other and a whole bunch of other fallout can happen. So just make sure that you really believe that you are doing the right thing for the community by enacting this procedure. And if you do that, you can do a lot of good, and hopefully you're one of the people willing to step into one of these vacancies that's left, step up to the plate and do a better job and really serve your community well. So that's all I got. I hope you got some value out of this. Like I said, I don't know that anybody on YouTube or on social media has been bold enough to teach the masses how to perform such a maneuver. So you're welcome.
We'll catch you next time. Thanks again. This is Jared with HOA Crusades. We'll talk to you later.